The roar of the diesel engine quieted as Danielle Brooks finally pulled her truck into the narrow driveway of her suburban home. She cut the ignition and let out a heavy sigh, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before resting her forehead against it. 12 hours at the hospital had drained her body, but at least she was home. Her 2016 Ford F-250 wasn't just a vehicle, it was her livelihood. As a traveling nurse who sometimes doubled as a home care assistant, the truck carried her gear, medical kits, and sometimes even patients' wheelchairs. Danielle had worked 2 jobs for years, saving every penny to pay off that truck. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, a symbol of independence she fought hard to earn. But not everyone saw it that way. As soon as she stepped out and locked the doors, she caught the faint movement of blinds shifting across the street. The same blinds, the same house, and the same woman. Karen Whitmore. The neighborhood knew her as the HOA Hawk. Mid-50s, sharp jawline, bleach blonde hair that looked like it was fried one salon visit too many. She always wore a visor when walking her little yapping dog and carried a clipboard as if she were on some official patrol. Danielle didn't need to look twice. She could feel Karen's glare burning holes in her back. It wasn't the first time. 2 weeks ago, Karen had stormed up Danielle's walkway and declared, "Work trucks don't belong in this neighborhood. This isn't a construction zone." Danielle, still in her scrubs, had stared at her in disbelief. "Excuse me, this is my driveway, my house, my truck." Karen crossed her arms. "We have standards. The HOA doesn't allow oversized vehicles. You're lowering the property value." Danielle remembered laughing out loud. "Property value? Lady, I pay my dues like everyone else here, unless you've got a copy of the bylaws that says I can't park my own truck in front of my own house, you need to back off." That conversation had ended with Karen huffing away, muttering something about filing a complaint, but nothing ever came of it. Danielle had checked the HOA rules herself. There was nothing about personal work trucks, only commercial vehicles with advertisements, and hers didn't have a single logo or company name on it. Still, every day since then, Karen found new ways to make her feel unwelcome. Nasty looks, snide remarks about people who don't fit the neighborhood aesthetic, fake smiles in front of others that quickly dropped when it was just the two of them. Danielle knew exactly what it was about. She was the only black homeowner on the block. And Karen wasn't just nitpicking about rules, she was making a statement. That evening, Danielle tried to shake it off. She kicked off her shoes, reheated some leftover pasta, and sank into her couch. The TV hummed in the background, but her mind wandered. She thought about her late father, a truck driver himself. He used to tell her, "People will always find something to hate, but you keep working, keep living, and let your success annoy them." Danielle smiled faintly at the memory. Her dad had died young, but his grit lived in her. She wasn't going to let some bitter neighbor dictate her life. Still, the tension was exhausting. The next morning, it happened again. Danielle was loading medical supplies into the backseat when she heard Karen's voice, sharp and cutting across the cul-de-sac. "You know, Danielle, that thing is an eyesore." Danielle closed the door and turned, her patience thinning. "Good morning to you too, Karen." Karen gestured at the truck with disgust. "Why don't you park it somewhere else, maybe at the hospital where it belongs?" "Because," Danielle said firmly, "this is my home and my truck belongs here, end of story." Karen scoffed, clutching her dog's leash tighter. "Don't get snippy with me, I've lived here 20 years, this neighborhood has rules, we're not going to let it turn into some garage sale parking lot." Danielle tilted her head. "You mean you're not going to let it? The rest of the neighbors seem fine with it." Karen's cheeks flushed. "You'll see, I'll make sure this doesn't last." Danielle didn't know what that meant, but she would soon find out. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything boiled over. Danielle had just come home early, a rare gift. She left her truck parked at the curb, not in the driveway, so she could quickly run inside and grab a change of clothes before meeting a friend. 10 minutes, that was all it took. When she came back to the window with a glass of water in her hand, her stomach dropped. A tow truck had pulled up beside her Ford. The driver, a scruffy-looking man in a neon vest, was already lowering the hook, preparing to latch onto her front tires. And standing proudly on the sidewalk, arms folded, was Karen. Her smug smile stretched ear to ear as she gestured toward the truck like a queen pointing at her prize. Danielle's heart raced. She stormed out the front door, shouting, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The driver looked startled, glancing between her and Karen. Ma'am, I got a call about a violation." "That's my truck," Danielle snapped, "and it's not going anywhere." Karen cut in smoothly, her voice dripping with false authority. "It's blocking the street, Danielle, against HOA rules. I filed the complaint and now it's being taken care of." Danielle's jaw clenched. "You filed the complaint, you don't run this neighborhood, and my truck isn't blocking anything. Look at all this space." Karen smirked. "Doesn't matter, you knew this day was coming." The tow driver shrugged helplessly. "Ma'am, I just follow orders if the HOA called." "But the HOA didn't call," Danielle shouted. "She did." The argument grew heated, voices echoing across the block. A few neighbors peeked from their porches, whispering among themselves. And then, before Danielle could say another word, the sound of a car door closing cut through the tension. She turned her head and froze. Not 30 feet away, parked against the curb, sat a black and white police cruiser. An officer had been there the entire time, apparently finishing up with another call in the neighborhood. And now he was walking toward them, adjusting his belt, expression firm. The officer stopped right beside the tow truck, eyeing the scene carefully. "All right, somebody want to explain what's going on here?" Karen straightened immediately, her voice eager. "Yes, officer, I reported this vehicle. It's in violation of HOA regulations. I requested a tow." Danielle shot back instantly. "That's a lie, she doesn't have that authority. This is my truck parked in front of my house and she's harassing me." The officer raised a brow. His gaze shifted from Danielle's fiery eyes to Karen's smug grin, then to the tow driver awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. And for the first time all day, Danielle felt a flicker of hope. The officer's presence hit the cul-de-sac like a thunderclap. Conversations hushed. The neighbors who had been watching from behind curtains or half-cracked doors now leaned a little farther out, curiosity taking hold. Danielle straightened her shoulders, forcing her breathing to steady. She wasn't about to let Karen's lies run the show. The officer's nameplate read Martinez. Mid-40s, calm but sharp-eyed, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen this kind of neighborhood drama one too many times. "All right," Officer Martinez said evenly, looking between them. "Let's take this one step at a time. Ma'am," he nodded at Karen, "you said this vehicle is in violation." Karen puffed up, seizing the chance to sound official. "Yes, I filed a complaint with the HOA. This truck has been parked here repeatedly against community rules. It's a work vehicle. Oversized. It brings down the neighborhood standard. I asked for a tow and the company responded." Danielle couldn't help but scoff. "That's not true. There's nothing in the HOA bylaws against my truck. I checked. And this," she pointed at the tow hook lowering toward her front tire, "this is harassment." Officer Martinez held up a hand, keeping both women from talking over each other. He turned to the tow truck driver. "Sir, do you have paperwork authorizing this tow?" The driver shifted uncomfortably, scratching his chin. "Oh well, not exactly, officer. The lady," he gestured toward Karen, "she called it in, said it was an HOA violation. She sounded pretty sure. Dispatch told me to head over." "Do you have a written order, a signed release from the HOA board?" Martinez pressed. The man hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir, just a verbal." Murmurs rippled from the neighbors now gathering outside. Danielle felt a flicker of vindication, but Karen jumped in quickly, her voice rising. "Officer, you don't understand," Karen said, her cheeks flushing red. "I'm on the HOA committee. I don't need a piece of paper to know when someone's breaking the rules." Martinez's expression didn't shift. "Are you the president of the HOA?" Karen blinked. "Well, no, but Vice president." "No, but I've lived here for 20 years and I've served on the board before. I know the regulations better than anyone." "Which means you should know," Martinez interrupted firmly, "that only the HOA board as a whole can authorize a vehicle tow, not an individual member, not even the president acting alone. And certainly not you, ma'am." Danielle bit back a grin. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but watching Karen's smugness melt into frustration was deeply satisfying. Karen's voice grew shrill, desperation leaking through. So you're telling me I can't protect my own neighborhood, that anyone can just dump a work truck in front of their house and I'm supposed to live with it? Danielle's voice cut like steel. It's not anyone's truck, it's mine, and it's not dumped here, I live here. I work 12-hour shifts keeping people alive, and this is the thanks I get, a neighbor calling a tow on my own property. The crowd stirred, someone muttered, she's right, while another neighbor whispered, Karen's at it again. Karen heard it too, her eyes darted around, realizing the tide was turning against her. This isn't about her job, Karen snapped, pointing a finger at Danielle. This is about rules that keep this neighborhood clean, professional, safe. Martinez's brow furrowed. Safe, how does her truck make the neighborhood unsafe? Karen's mouth opened but nothing came out. For once she didn't have a quick retort. Exactly, the officer said flatly. This isn't about safety, this is about you deciding what you think should be allowed, and that's not how the law works. Danielle took a deep breath, feeling the knot in her chest loosen. Officer, this isn't the first time. She's been harassing me since I moved in, always with comments about my truck, about me not fitting in. This isn't about HOA rules, this is personal. Karen gasped as though the accusation was outrageous. That is not true. But the way her eyes flickered away gave her away. Martinez studied Karen carefully. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Calling for a tow without proper authorization isn't just a mistake, it can be considered harassment. It wastes time, resources, and money. Depending on how far it goes, it could even cross into fraud. Karen's face turned beet red. Fraud? Are you serious? I was trying to do my duty. No, Martinez said, his tone unyielding. You were trying to enforce rules that don't exist, and you did it at the expense of your neighbor. The tow driver cleared his throat nervously. Officer, if there's no official order, I should probably unhook this thing and go. I don't want to get wrapped up in this. Yes, Martinez nodded, that's the right call. Danielle exhaled deeply, relief washing over her as the man bent down to retract the tow hook. Her truck, her hard-earned truck, was safe. But the drama wasn't over. Karen wasn't backing down, even as her authority unraveled in front of everyone. She jabbed a finger in Danielle's direction. You don't understand, officer, people like her. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and gasps erupted from the gathering crowd. Danielle's jaw tightened. She known all along that this wasn't just about the truck, but hearing Karen almost say it out loud, that was different, that cut deeper. Martinez's eyes narrowed, his voice dropped an octave, stern and commanding. People like her, finish that sentence, ma'am. Karen's lips pressed together. She stammered, I just meant people who bring work vehicles into family neighborhoods. It's not the image we want here. But the damage was done. The neighbors knew exactly what she'd almost said. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. She's always been like this. Picking fights with everyone. Danielle deserves better. Karen turned, horrified to realize she'd lost her audience. Martinez straightened his posture. Here, what's going to happen? This tow isn't authorized, so the truck stays. Sir, he gestured at the driver, you're free to leave once your rig is clear. And ma'am, his gaze locked on Karen, if I hear about you making unauthorized calls again or harassing your neighbor, I will file a formal report. Do you understand me? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She wanted to argue, she wanted to lash out, but with the neighbors watching, with Danielle standing tall and with a uniformed officer glaring down at her, she couldn't. All she managed was a weak, this isn't over. Danielle smirked, oh, I think it is. The officer gave a small nod of approval, then stepped aside as the tow driver packed up his gear. The street slowly returned to normal, but the weight of what just happened hung thick in the air. Danielle watched Karen retreat to her house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the window panes. She knew this wasn't the last she'd hear from her, but for once, she wasn't the one on the defensive. For the first time in weeks, Danielle felt a strange sense of peace. Not just because her truck was safe, but because the truth was out. Everyone had seen Karen for who she really was. Still, she couldn't shake the thought, what would happen next? Would Karen double down on her harassment? Would the HOA actually step in this time, or would justice finally catch up with her? As Danielle closed her front door and leaned against it, she didn't know the answer. But she did know one thing, she wasn't afraid anymore. In Karen, she was on borrowed time. The sound of the tow truck pulling away left a hollow silence in the cul-de-sac. Danielle stood on the curb, her arms folded across her chest, watching the last flash of neon disappear around the corner. Her truck sat exactly where she'd left it, safe, grounded, untouchable. But the battle wasn't over. Karen lingered on her lawn, packing in tight circles like a caged animal. She muttered under her breath, too low for anyone to hear, but her face burned red as the neighbors continued whispering. Curtains weren't closing this time, people were stepping outside, taking sides with their presence. For years, Karen had bullied and intimidated quietly, one house at a time, but today everyone saw it unfold in the open, and they weren't siding with her. Officer Martinez turned back to Danielle, his voice was steady but softer now. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to grab your ID so I can document this properly, just a quick report to make sure it's on record." Danielle nodded, her chest loosening. She hurried inside, retrieved her wallet, and handed him her license. As he jotted notes, Karen finally snapped. "Are you really wasting police resources on this?" she barked, stepping closer. "I called for a tow on a violation, she's exaggerating, I shouldn't be punished for looking out for the neighborhood." Martinez didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, I suggest you take a step back and lower your voice." Karen froze, stunned at the pushback. She wasn't used to authority being directed at her. But Danielle, she'd waited weeks for this moment. "Officer," Danielle said, her voice calm but cutting, "I've documented the harassment. I've saved texts from her fake complaints, notes she's left on my door. I didn't report it before because I thought it wasn't worth the trouble, but clearly it's escalated." Karen whipped her head around, eyes wide. "She's lying." But Danielle reached into her phone, scrolled, and held up the screen. Sure enough, a series of messages glared back. "This is your final warning, get that truck out of here. You don't belong in this neighborhood with your work vehicles. If you cared about property values, you'd respect the HOA standards." The last one carried a photo Karen had taken of Danielle's truck in her own driveway, time-stamped and smug. Martinez's brows furrowed. He took the phone, studied it carefully, and nodded. "This," he said firmly, "is harassment, plain and simple." The neighbors gasped again. Karen's hands trembled as she stepped back, her facade crumbling. "Harassment," she repeated, her voice cracking. "I was protecting our homes, that's what the HOA is for." Martinez shook his head. "No, the HOA has a process. It requires official notices, written communication, and board votes. What you've done is bypass the system, harass your neighbor, and waste public resources. I'm citing you for filing a false service call and creating a public disturbance." Karen's jaw dropped. You can't do that." But the sound of a pen scratching against a ticket pad said otherwise. He tore the slip free and handed it to her. "Consider this a warning too. Next time it won't just be a fine, it'll be a court date." Karen stared at the paper as though it were poison. Her fingers shook as she snatched it from his hand, her mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. The neighbors erupted in quiet approval. "Finally. About time she got checked. She's been terrorizing this block for years." Danielle didn't join the chorus, she didn't need to. She simply stood tall, watching Karen shrink under the weight of her own arrogance. For once, she wasn't the one on trial. When the officer finished his notes and gave Danielle back her phone, he offered a reassuring nod. "You did the right thing, standing your ground, and you documented everything. That's smart. If she keeps this up, file a restraining order, but something tells me she won't be so bold anymore." Danielle gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, officer, really." He tipped his cap. "Just doing my job, you take care now." With that, he returned to his cruiser and drove off, leaving the neighborhood buzzing. Karen stood frozen on her lawn, humiliated. Danielle walked past her slowly, deliberately, heading back toward her front door. She paused just long enough to meet Karen's eyes. "This isn't your neighborhood, Karen," Danielle said softly but loud enough for the gathering to hear. "It's ours, all of ours, and you don't make the rules." Karen's face crumpled. Without a word, she spun on her heel and stormed inside, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the street. The crowd lingered for a few moments longer before dispersing, but the mood was lighter now. Neighbors approached Danielle, some for the first time. "You handled that well. She had it coming." If she bothers you again, we've got your back. Danielle felt warmth spread through her chest. For weeks, she'd felt isolated, targeted. But now, standing in the middle of her street with her community finally on her side, she felt something new, belonging. Later that night, Danielle sat on her porch steps watching the sunset bleed orange across the sky. Her truck sat parked exactly where it should, sturdy, reliable, hers. She thought of her father again: keep working, keep living, and let your success annoy them. He'd been right, she hadn't needed to scream or stoop to Karen's level. All she'd needed was truth, patience, and the courage to stand firm. Karen's downfall wasn't just about a truck. It was about exposing the ugliness of control, prejudice, and entitlement. And it was a reminder to every neighbor watching: silence only empowers the bully. The following morning, Danielle woke to something surprising. On her porch lay a small card. No signature, no note, just 3 words written neatly across the front. "We support you." Danielle smiled. Maybe it was the Smiths from next door. Maybe it was Mrs. Alvarez, who always waved at her kids. Whoever it was, the message was clear. Karen's reign was over. And Danielle, she had won without losing herself. The key lesson: entitlement and prejudice will always try to disguise themselves as rules or concern. But when faced with truth, law, and unity, they crumble. Standing your ground isn't just about protecting your property, it's about protecting your dignity. Danielle's truck was more than metal and wheels. It was her life, her work, her pride. And no neighbor, no false complaint, and no HOA Karen could take that away.